Greg Bourne.
One of the most serious things about this debate is there is a very serious procrastination penalty. The scientists clearly understand what is going on and the projections of how temperature will occur, and the rate of acceleration is such that every year we delay is a huge procrastination penalty. As we listen to skeptics like Ray Evans, who for decades has fed information into the business area within Australia, procrastination occurred. Fortunately, organisations like the Business Council of Australia have now moved on and said, the risk is too great. There will always be uncertainty. We must manage this risk. We must move forward. The time for debating the science for most business people is just over, just over. It's managing the future risk, which is very serious, and that's where we should be really focusing.
Nonetheless, one of the things we are doing here is debating science, and just to finish a point, I want to go back to David Caroli, because a cry came from the audience, prove it, when you said that CO2 concentrations are higher now than they ever have been in the history of the planet.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, well, I misunderstood you too, so
what I said
you did say.
What I said was carbon dioxide concentrations now at 380 parts per million are higher than at any time over the last million years. They've definitely been much higher in the past. 55 million years ago, they were substantially higher, I think over 2,000 parts per million. In the Cretaceous and Jurassic period, they were more than 10 times the concentration that they are now, and that carbon dioxide was used in plants that were then buried to produce the fossil fuels that we're burning and then releasing back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So we could go back into the Jurassic and Cretaceous period if we really wanted to. We seem to be going that way by burning the fossil fuels. I wanted to pick a point that Bob Carter mentioned, that 1998 was the warmest year on the record, which is true in some observational records, and that the climate has cooled since then. That is wrong. If we take the average temperature around 1998 and the average over the last 3 years, the warmer temperatures are the last 3 years than the 3 years around 1998. If we fit a linear trend from 1998 to 2006, it shows warming. Both of those statements are easily, demonstrably proven. You can get the data from many websites, and they both show that the climate has warmed since 1998. But 1998 was the warmest year. It was also the strongest El Nino, and that warms the global climate.
Just first, a quick comment from Nick Rowley, because he's been raising his hand there, and then Bob Carter.
Bob Carter here, we've got David Caroli there. It's looking a bit like a sort of 50-50 debate in relation to the observed global warming.
This is the consensus, my friend.
Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, the way I'd look at this is we've come into this century that we're in now in reasonably good shape. There's a chance we might get out of it in reasonably good shape. But the only way we're going to get out of this century in reasonably good shape, I think, is if we really tackle the link between energy growth and emissions growth. And that's why I was very interested by what Nikki was saying, because coal, in my view, is going to have to be a very significant part of that. We're not talking about the need for a global revolution. The smart business leaders, like Greg used to be, and there are many who we used to work with when I was working at Number 10 and we're working with now, they know, and you may throw up Dan Estey's book, but they know that low-carbon growth is smart growth, and low-carbon growth need not bankrupt the global economy at all, but is actually a positive way to promote more sustainable growth.
OK, I can hear the audience saying, what about the audience? I know, I will come to you in a moment. There's one final sort of section of the program we haven't dealt with, and that is Durkin's underlying political thesis that global warming science will in fact penalise third world economies, restricting their access to cheap power, denying them the right of economic development. Nikki Williams, I know that you have something to say on that.
Look, I certainly don't think it's global warming science that's going to deprive the third world of its capacity to develop. I think where we have to be extremely careful are the policies that we adopt in order to mitigate for the impacts of climate change. We need to recognise that, as the film said, 2 billion people on the planet don't have a humble electric light bulb. Our population is going to go from 6.5 billion to 9 billion in the next 30 years. Electrification is key to development, and we're going to have to ensure that the people in the developing world have access to the means that removes them from poverty. And that will only come through power. And the reality is that fossil fuels, and particularly coal, are so widely available and so competitively priced that they will be used by the developing world. China alone is building 500 new coal-fired power stations over the next 10 years. Every 4 days, China is opening a new power station. Now, that's a very significant reality. So the sort of low emission technologies that need to be adopted to make sure that the emissions growth is slowed is absolutely essential, because we cannot allow policies which actually continue to exacerbate the divide between the developed and developing world. It's our responsibility to make sure not that we stop development, but that we ensure development is consistent with what the planet environmentally requires.
OK, well, we have a fractious and an engaged audience, and it is time to give them the final part of the program to have their say and also to ask questions of the panel. Restrict to the panel if you can. I'll start with this gentleman on the end here who has his hand up.
Thank you. To our garrulous sceptic friend in the middle there, my question is, if you're using millions of years or billions of years, even in the age of coal, and the substance itself is now under question, they've found carbon-14 in copious measurable amounts in coal. So we've got to ask the question about the age of coal itself. That's a huge one that's just come out in 70 reports. Even the US Coal Board has announced, oh, we've found carbon-14 in coal. Rewrites your whole underlying assumptions of the whole age factor in this principle, and all the statistics based on these so-called ages and millennia, out by magnitudes in factors they're now discovering. Number two, there's a United Nations treaty on the banning of weather warfare.
Let's just stick to one, because there's a lot of people who want to say, who did you direct that to? Was
our garrulous friend in the middle.
David Caroli?
I actually have no idea what the question was.
Okay.
Carbon-14 in coal means it's nothing to do with millions of years.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because unfortunately I didn't quite understand you either. There is a question right up the back there. We'll take that one first. At the very back.
Me?
Yes.
I'd like to take the debate into another question. I mean, we've been debating the science here. We've not debated anything in terms of the credibility of the environmentalist movement. The environmentalist movement was formed by Sir Julian Huxley, who was the founder of the Eugenics Society. The WWF and these other organisations are actually offspins from that Eugenics Society. Now, what Martin Durkin is saying, that this has huge implications for the developing countries. Is that the intention behind this whole environmentalist scam behind global warming swindle?
Look, I'll just quickly throw that one to Greg Bourne, since he is an environmentalist and a former businessman.
I think if I were to talk to my colleagues in Nepal, Bhutan, the Congo, those parts which are very, very poor, those colleagues in China, colleagues in India, who very definitely have grown up looking at how do we ease poverty, how do we find a way forward for this world, and how do we manage the environment and economy at the same time. The world has moved on from that debate. This is a very, very sophisticated, understanding group of people who are passionately caring about people and the environment and the economy.
OK, I'll go back to the audience. We'll try and keep them short. This gentleman in the white sweater there.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask the gentleman there, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left? You mentioned these two...
I think that's you, Michael Duffy.
You held up a book and a pamphlet. Now, what was your objection to embracing new business opportunities in renewable energy?
I have no objection to that. I think it's entirely rational behaviour. My point was simply that we shouldn't assume that simply because hard-headed business people are doing this, they're doing it solely or only because they're convinced by the science. They may be convinced by the move in public opinion or the move in government regulations, for example.
But it would be part of the insurance policy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's entirely rational behaviour.